Welcome to the Wing of Classic Animation. Today we're going to look at someone who might possibly be one of the most important characters of all time. Have you ever seen this rabbit character on merchandise and walking around the Disney parks and wondered, just who is he? Well, had the wind blown differently one Los Angeles night, this monochrome little rabbit could have been the face of the entire Disney company instead of Mickey Mouse. The year was 1923. Walt Disney, with his fellow cartoonist, Ub Iwerks, along with a small staff of animators, were working on a little project known as Alice's Wonderland. Not to be confused with Alice in Wonderland, which would come out 28 years later. Alice's Wonderland is the first episode of a series known as the Alice Comedies, in which cartoons were combined with a live-action girl, played by Virginia Davis, and her adventures in an animated world. Running from lions, riding in parades, and smoking. It was a different time. And on a side note, if you're interested in checking out this first episode of the Alice Comedies, it's included as a bonus feature on the 60th anniversary Blu-ray of Alice in Wonderland. Just throwing that out there. Unfortunately, around this time, Walt's place of creativity, Laugh-O-Gram Studios, went bankrupt and was closed. However, Walt Disney's imagination could not be stopped, so he bought a one-way train ticket to Los Angeles to attempt to find someone to distribute his Alice comedies. It was then that he met Margaret Winkler and her husband, Charles Mintz.
It's a trap!
Well, kind of. Somewhat. Well, not really. But, well, let me talk about it. See, both worked for Winkler Pictures and produced and distributed cartoons, and Margaret found an interest in Alice's Wonderland and signed Walt up for a one-year contract to create more. During this time, and up until 1927, Walt made a total of 57 Alice films, and they proved to do very well. However, Charles Mintz was unhappy with how much the Alice comedies cost to create, and asked Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks to come up with a new character whose shorts would be cheaper to make. And since Universal Studios now wanted to break into the animation business, this would give them an opportunity to sell them a brand new character. The result of this, in 1927, was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. The character was decided to be made into a rabbit since at that time in the animation world there were so many cat characters on the market, like Felix the Cat and Crazy Cat. The decision to name him Oswald came from Universal drawing names out of a hat, and the idea of putting Lucky in his name came from the superstition that rabbits' feet were lucky. With the character now created, Walt Disney and Ub Iwerks worked on the very first Oswald cartoon, Poor Papa. In this short, Oswald plays an expecting father outside a delivery room. And then with the arrival of several storks dropping baby rabbits into the room, Oswald finds he is now the parent of numerous baby bunnies. And of course, hijinks ensues, and Oswald is having trouble keeping his kids under control. What makes things worse is the storks return and Oswald proceeds to shoot at them, not even caring if he might hit one of the babies. But it doesn't work and Oswald gets more happy baby bunnies. Unfortunately, this short was not received well by Universal Studios. A lot of complaints were with Oswald himself. They thought he was too old. That, and they were unsatisfied with the sloppiness of the cartoon. When Walt and Iwerks made the second Oswald short, Trolley Troubles, they now had Oswald designed much younger, neater, and, as they would say, peppier. Trolley Troubles' animation and overall design was much more polished and nicer looking than Poor Papa. And you know what? It was a success. Universal was happy with it, and so was Walt. His business was now booming, allowing the studio to grow to around 20 people. But Walt was a little worried with how good Oswald was doing. Charles Mintz, who made the deal with Universal, might not renew the contract. Basically, Mintz knew he would make more money off Oswald if he moved the production from Disney to his own studio. So now Walt Disney had lost the character that he and Ub Iwerks had created. But history has a funny way of working things out. Little did Charles Mintz know that he had just set Walt Disney on the path of greatness, for this event had taught him that the next character he was going to create, he would make sure was his. No one would be able to take the rights away from him. And of course, what came from that was a little mouse named Mickey. But now that Walt Disney was on a different path with his new character, what happened to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? Well, Charles Mintz continued to make Oswald cartoons until Universal decided to take complete control and terminate the contract, which had all Oswald shorts made in their studio only. Over the next decade, many Oswald cartoons were created, and his design was starting to look a little different. Oswald's new look was designed by Woody Woodpecker creator Walter Lantz, in which he now wore white gloves, shoes, a shirt, and had an overall cuter design. Well, depends on who you ask, actually. But it didn't stop there. In 1935, his appearance changed once again. Wow. It's like he's not even the same character anymore. I mean, I guess I shouldn't really judge. I mean, Mickey's design did change from his original look, but I don't know. Even then, he still held on to a little bit of his old design, whereas Oswald looks like a complete overhaul of everything. So what would come next for Oswald were a variety of cartoons until he slowly drifted out of the public eye. He would make a few cameos in Woody Woodpecker shorts and some comic books, but that's about it. And that's the way it stayed for quite a few decades. Fast forward to 2006. So by this time, the Disney company had already purchased the ESPN network, which broadcasted Monday Night Football. At the same time, NBC, which was owned by Universal Studios, broadcasted Sunday Night Football. Al Michaels, a sportscaster for ESPN, wanted out of his contract so he could go over to NBC's side of football entertainment. Bob Iger, the president of the Walt Disney Company, saw this as an opportunity. He called up George Brodenheimer, who was president of ESPN, and told him to let Al Michaels go in exchange for Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Brodenheimer had the same reaction that I'm sure a lot of us would have. Who or what is Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? Bob Iger then explained the importance of the character, and then Brodenheimer contacted Dick Ebersol, the president of NBC, and even though he too was clueless about who Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was, he talked to Universal. Universal was like, yeah, who cares, take the rabbit, and the deal was made. Or trade was made, I guess. Ain't that a weird situation? How would you like to go down in history as being traded to another company for a cartoon rabbit? Man, the stuff that goes on in Hollywood, am I right? So after more than half a century, Oswald was finally a part of the Walt Disney Company, and by 2007, his merchandise was being sold at the Disney parks. A DVD was released of all his cartoons, and of course, what a lot of people first knew him from, the video game Epic Mickey. And honestly, this game was my introduction to the character, even though I took a history of animation class years before this. I must have forgotten about him. I feel guilty for that. But Epic Mickey was like the grand return celebration for Oswald. It pulled out all the stops and gave us, in my opinion, one of the absolute best Disney video games of all time. The story of the game takes place in the cartoon wasteland where forgotten toons go. This is where Oswald lives with other obscure Disney characters. That's kind of somber, isn't it, when you think about all that happened to Oswald in real life. But it's possible that the game was the reason Disney got the rights back to Oswald in the first place. You see, it was in development since 2003, and when the idea was brought to Bob Iger, he told the team that they couldn't make it because Disney didn't own the rights to Oswald. But soon after, he made it one of his goals to get the rights back. So maybe it was Epic Mickey that put the idea in his head to retrieve the character from Universal. Maybe. But the important thing was that after so long, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was now officially part of Disney. And while he hasn't been given his own series or movie as of yet, he has been making cameos. The best one probably is in Get a Horse, which played right before Frozen. He can be seen for a quick moment peeking out from behind the curtain towards the end. And if you want to see him in person, he's even been given his own place in the parks. Right at the entrance of California Adventure, you will find Oswald's service station, which sells lots of the Monochrome Rabbit's merchandise. And Oswald himself appears every now and then to greet guests. So on behalf of all Disney fans everywhere, welcome home, Oswald.